Social media is lying to you about Australia. I feel like a lot of people get the whole idea of moving to Australia by what they see online, but for me, online and social media is not a good representation of what life actually is like in Australia. You see the highlights online for sure. Certain things are definitely blown out of proportion online, and I think there's a lot of lies that are spread about Australia, misconceptions and stuff like that. And in general, I think social media a lot of the time is lying to you about Australia. Now there is a difference. If you're watching videos about Australia like this one, like people who have lived there from personal experience and are giving you their honest thoughts on life in Australia, that's a great way to get an idea of what life is like in Australia. However, scrolling on TikTok and scrolling on Instagram, seeing people's lives in Australia, seeing them do amazing things every weekend and encounter all these different things, that is not such an accurate representation of life in Australia. And we'll come on to that in today's video. So the first point, quite simply, is I've mentioned this before, and it is the constant holiday vibe. I know people say, well, obviously not. It's not going to be a constant holiday if you're moving. You know, you've got to live your normal life and stuff. But I think a lot of people are very naive to this when they first move, particularly those people who do see it on Instagram, on TikTok, this amazing Australian lifestyle. For me, the people who move because of that are the people that are going to be the most disappointed with their move there, because they kind of get hit with this massive reality shock. Like I say, the first couple of weeks in Australia is amazing, and the whole time in Australia is amazing for sure, but it doesn't feel like a holiday the whole time. The first couple of weeks does. You're going to have the best time ever, but once you get into that routine of having to work, do your food shop, pay rent, you know, life can still be boring sometimes in Australia. And I think even though it sounds obvious, and I get a lot of comments saying like, obviously, who thinks you haven't got to do that? I think you'll be surprised, because a lot of people are in for that shock when they first move to Australia. If you've got problems back in the UK, yeah, you can leave some of them behind, but a lot of them problems are just going to follow you to Australia. You're just going to be in a much better place, in my opinion, but you've still got to work at them things and just be prepared for people set very high expectations that they're going to move abroad to Australia and this whole new life is going to be constantly amazing. And then they feel shit when they are having difficult periods, and a lot of people give up and go home because maybe they're not expecting that. But it's one thing you should expect. I've had times abroad where I've been very bored, unhappy with where I'm living and stuff, and you've got to ride through them times. And I think the main thing is to expect them, because your life isn't going to constantly be amazing just because you've moved. Another lie that you see on social media about Australia is the weather. Now, obviously, 90% of the time you're watching social media, you are seeing blue skies, you're seeing this amazing beach weather. And whilst Australia weather is definitely a lot better than the UK, it surprised me, to be honest, how cold and how wet the winters actually were in Australia. Definitely in the south. If you go up north into Queensland and stuff, and the Northern Territory, it is warm for the majority of the year, but down in the south, in the cities, the weather could be pretty rough in the winter. Sydney winter was freezing, it was so windy. We lived in Adelaide and Perth in the winter, and honestly, some mornings it got close to zero. I initially moved to Australia with my best mate, and he packed this big like puffer jacket, and I was thinking, why are you bringing that? We're moving to Australia, you are not going to need a coat. And then 2 months later, when it was winter, I was thinking like, fair play, you made the right call to bring a coat, because I was freezing. I didn't expect the winter to be as cold as it was. It's not as cold as the UK winter, obviously, but be prepared for it, because Australia on social media looks like it's constantly sunny. Yes, it's a lot sunnier than the UK, but there's still a pretty, especially if you live in the south, there's a good 4-month period where the weather's pretty shit. The next lie, potentially the biggest lie I see on social media about Australia, is the snakes, the spiders, the bugs, all that kind of thing. I've said this before, but there's people out there who I've heard say, oh, I could never move to Australia because of the bugs and the snakes. Like, first of all, if that's the reason you're not moving to Australia, you need to grow up and just move there, because I don't like snakes and spiders. But I was one of them people when I arrived, to be fair. I was checking under the toilet seat everywhere, thinking, oh, there's going to be a spider. After a while, you just get bored of doing that. And then I was there 2 years and hardly saw any snakes and spiders. The only snakes I saw was when I was doing farm work in Queensland, literally on a farm, like no shit, there's going to be snakes there. But in the cities, even like we went quite remote a lot of the time, and I didn't see one huntsman spider, which you do see all over social media because the amount of people have seen like huntsmans and they're freaking out. I was expecting to come in, encounter huntsman spiders every week, but I didn't see one huntsman in Australia. I only saw one redback and a couple of brown snakes at farm work. But if you listen to social media, you would think that you're going to be seeing spiders in your house every week. Genuinely, I saw more spiders in the UK, that's a fact. So I would definitely not let that put you off moving to Australia. One thing you do have to watch out for, which I didn't expect, were the flies and the cockroaches. There should be way more people talking about them because there's a lot more flies and cockroaches in Australia. The next misconception or lie that you see on social media about Australia is that Aussies are crazy. They're all alcoholics, they're drinking, they're just these mental people. After moving to Australia, Aussies are the most chilled out people in the world. Aussies are very, very chilled out. They're just laid back. They don't take life too seriously and yeah, just very calm. I don't know if this is because of this type of people I've seen on social media that are from Australia, and a lot of the time they are pretty mental people. They're just crazy, they're always drinking, they're always partying, they're very loud. One thing I've realised is Aussies are not loud, they are just chilled out. Similar to British people in that aspect. I expected them to be very crazy, but Aussies are a lot more chilled out than they come across online. I see some mental videos of Aussies just like tackling kangaroos and stuff, and like there's a few obviously like that, but from my experience, Aussies are a lot more chilled out than they come across online, and actually a lot healthier as well. They come across online as big drinkers and stuff. There's a much bigger drinking culture in the UK. Aussies are very healthy. And the final lie you see on social media is the kangaroos. Now obviously you hear that there's literally more kangaroos than people in Australia. I'm pretty sure that's a fact, which is pretty mad. But it took me about 4 or 5 months into Australia until I saw my first kangaroo. I thought they were going to be jumping around everywhere. Obviously not in the city centre, but you expect to see them everywhere. I went out pretty, not remote, but I went out to like nature and stuff and still didn't see any. The first ones I saw was when I went and did my farm work in Queensland. But even going through the outback, we did like a 24-hour coach through the outback and still didn't see any kangaroos. There are certain places where you will see some, but when you hear there's more kangaroos than people in Australia, you expect they're going to be hopping everywhere. But in Australia, I probably only saw a handful of kangaroos during my time there. But they are pretty cool when you see them. They are fucking mad animals. So they are some lies that you see on social media. Not all of them are lies, but misconceptions, and some things are over exaggerated on social media for sure. Generally, the biggest takeaway from this video is to do proper research. And if you want to move to Australia and genuinely want to move there, 100% do it. I would just think deeply into it rather than just seeing it on TikTok and spontaneously booking it, because I mean that can work out, but in general I think you need to do some good research, because there is this image that's portrayed of Australia online which isn't always accurate. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're from the UK or whatever planning to move to Australia, let me know if you have any questions. If you're from Australia or have been there yourself, let me know your thoughts on my experience there and these lies. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.